Imagine, if you will, walking through an ancient forest at twilight, where the last golden rays of sunlight filter through leaves that have whispered secrets for thousands of years. As you step carefully over roots that have grown thick and gnarled, with age you begin to wonder, what stories might these trees tell if they could speak? What civilizations might have walked this very path before you, leaving only the faintest traces in the earth beneath your feet? Tonight, we're going to embark on a gentle journey through one of the most intriguing questions that has ever graced the human imagination. What if we are not the first civilization to call this beautiful blue planet home? What if, long before our cities rose toward the sky, other thinking beings built their own dreams into reality, only to fade back into the earth like morning mist? Before we begin this soothing exploration together, if you enjoy these relaxing science stories that help guide you toward peaceful sleep, feel free to subscribe, give this video a like, and comment below. Let me know what country you're watching from and what time you're listening to this tonight. Your presence here, wherever you are in this vast world, makes this journey all the more meaningful. Now, settle in comfortably. Pull your blankets a little closer. Let your breathing slow and deepen. Tonight, we're going to drift through time itself, exploring the gentle mysteries that lie hidden in the layers of our planet's long, long story. Close your eyes if you'd like, and let your imagination carry you on soft wings into the realm of possibility. Picture, for just a moment, the Earth as she was 65 million years ago. The air is thick and warm, filled with the calls of creatures we can barely imagine. Vast ferns stretch toward a sun that seemed somehow different, casting dappled shadows across landscapes that would be utterly foreign to our modern eyes. This is a world where massive dinosaurs move like living mountains through primordial forests, their footsteps creating rhythms that echo through valleys carved by ancient rivers. But here's where our gentle curiosity begins to bloom like a night blooming flower. What if, in some quiet corner of that ancient world, something remarkable was beginning to stir? What if intelligence, that mysterious spark that allows beings to wonder, to create, to dream, was already flickering to life in ways we've never imagined? Consider the humble octopus drifting through our modern oceans with grace that seems almost otherworldly. These remarkable creatures can solve puzzles, use tools, change not just their color, but their very texture to become invisible against the sea floor. They seem to possess a kind of intelligence that feels alien to us, beautiful and strange. Now imagine, what if 65 million years ago, in those warm, shallow seas that covered much of our planet, the ancestors of such creatures had time, so much time, to develop even further? Think of it this way. If you were to compress all of Earth's history into a single year, human civilization would appear only in the final few seconds before midnight on December 31st. We are so very new to this ancient stage. The dinosaurs ruled for over 160 million years. That's like having July, August, September, and October all to themselves. And before them, other creatures held the spotlight for hundreds of millions of years more. It's humbling, isn't it? Like standing at the edge of a vast ocean at night, watching waves that have been rolling toward shore since long before your great-great-grandmother's great-great-grandmother was even born. Each wave carries stories, whispers of times, so distant that they feel like dreams. But what makes this question, this gentle, wondering question about previous civilizations, so beautifully intriguing is not just the vastness of time, but the nature of evidence itself. You see, our planet is like a master recycler, constantly remaking herself. The ocean floors we see today have all been created within the last 200 million years. The continents drift like slow-moving ships, carrying their cargo of rocks and fossils to new destinations across geological ages. Mountains rise and wear away, their stone becoming sand, their sand becoming new stone in an endless, patient dance. Imagine trying to find evidence of a paper airplane after leaving it outside for just one winter. Rain would soften it, wind would scatter it, frost would break it down, and eventually it would become part of the soil, feeding new plants that would grow and die and become soil themselves. Now imagine trying to find evidence of that paper airplane, not after one winter, but after millions of winters, millions of summers, millions of seasons of change. This is the gentle challenge that faces us when we wonder about ancient civilizations. Time is like the most thorough house cleaner imaginable, constantly tidying up, constantly erasing, constantly making space for the new by carefully folding away the old. A city built of wood and metal and stone might seem permanent to us, but to the earth, it's just a temporary arrangement of materials that should patiently reclaim, atom by atom, over the slow turning of ages. Yet this same process that erases also preserves in the most unexpected ways. Sometimes a leaf falls into just the right kind of mud and becomes a fossil. Sometimes an entire insect is trapped in amber, preserved in golden perfection for millions upon millions of years. Sometimes a footprint in soft clay becomes stone, keeping the memory of a single step taken on a day so long ago that even the stars have moved to new positions in the sky. So when we wonder about previous civilizations, we're not just wondering about the past, we're wondering about the nature of memory itself, about how stories survive, about what kinds of traces might possibly endure through the vast, patient processes of geological time. It's like wondering if the echo of an ancient song might still be reverberating somewhere in the world, so softly that only the most careful listeners might detect its fading melody. And perhaps that's exactly what we are becoming, careful listeners, learning to hear the whispers that the earth has been keeping safe in her stones, in her ice, in the layers of sediment that accumulate like pages in the slowest book ever written. Each layer tells a story of the conditions that existed when it was formed, the temperature of ancient seas, the composition of prehistoric atmospheres, the types of life that flourished and faded like seasonal flowers across the long garden of deep time. As you rest there, breathing slowly and deeply, let yourself imagine what it might feel like to be one of those careful listeners, gently turning the pages of Earth's long story, wondering what other chapters might be waiting to be discovered. Asterisk, asterisk, in the quiet corners of scientific laboratories around the world, researchers are doing something quite beautiful and patient. They're learning to read the Earth's diary, a diary written not in words, but in the language of chemistry, in the whispers of ancient atmospheres trapped in ice, in the slow accumulation of elements in ocean sediments that settled like snow over millions of peaceful years. Imagine holding a core of ice from Antarctica in your hands. This isn't ordinary ice. It's a frozen library, each thin layer representing a single year of snowfall from long ago. Some of these layers hold air bubbles from atmospheres that existed when woolly mammoths walked the earth, when the great ice sheets stretched much further south, when the very composition of our air was different from what we breathe tonight. As you rest here, listening to these gentle words, scientists call this paleoclimatology, the study of ancient climates, and it's like being a detective of the most patient kind. They can measure the exact levels of carbon dioxide that existed in our atmosphere hundreds of thousands of years ago. They can tell you about volcanic eruptions that happened so long ago that entire mountain ranges have risen and worn away since then. They can read the signatures of forest fires, of asteroid impacts, of periods when the oceans were more acidic or more alkaline than they are today. But here's where our bedtime wondering becomes particularly interesting, like finding an unexpected flower blooming in a moonlit garden. In 2018, a scientist named Gavin Schmidt began to ask a beautifully simple question. If an industrial civilization had existed on Earth millions of years ago, what traces might we actually be able to find? Today, He called this the Silurian Hypothesis, named not because he believed lizard people once ruled the earth, but after a science fiction story that playfully imagined such a possibility. It was a thought experiment, a kind of gentle what if that scientists sometimes explore to better understand the boundaries of what we can know and what we cannot. Think about our own civilization for a moment. We've been burning fossil fuels intensively for only about 200 years, less than the lifespan of the oldest living trees. In that brief time, we've changed the chemistry of the atmosphere. We've spread synthetic materials across the globe. We've altered the isotopic composition of the carbon in our air. These changes are dramatic and measurable, but they're also very recent in the vast scale of geological time. Now, imagine if our civilization were to disappear tomorrow. The plastic we've created might persist in certain environments for thousands of years. The changes we've made to atmospheric chemistry might be detectable in ice cores for tens of thousands of years. The concrete and steel of our cities might leave traces for millions of years, but they would be subtle traces scattered and transformed by the patient processes of geological change. But what about tens of millions of years from now? What about hundreds of millions of years? The further we project into the future, the fainter our footprint becomes. Eventually, the only signs that we ever existed might be a thin layer in the geological record showing unusual concentrations of certain elements, perhaps a brief spike in carbon isotopes, maybe some rare earth metals concentrated in ways that don't occur naturally, possibly some synthetic molecules that never existed before life learned to make them. This is the beautiful scientific challenge that Schmidt was exploring. He wasn't suggesting that ancient civilizations definitely existed. Rather, he was asking what we would need to look for, and what we might realistically expect to find if they had. It's like asking, if someone had walked through this forest 1,000,000 years ago, what kind of footprints might still be preserved in the stone? The answer is both humbling and fascinating. Most of what we think of as the obvious signs of civilization, the buildings, the roads, the machines, would be gone, recycled by the Earth's patient processes into new forms. But some signatures might remain, unusual spikes in certain chemicals in the geological record, isotopic anomalies that don't match natural patterns, maybe concentrations of elements that don't occur naturally in those combinations. It's worth noting, as we drift deeper into this gentle exploration, that we haven't found such signatures. The geological record, as far as we can read it, tells a story of natural processes, of life evolving and changing and adapting over vast spans of time, but not of previous industrial civilizations. This doesn't prove they never existed. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, as scientists like to say, but it does suggest that if they did exist, they were either very different from us, or they existed so long ago that even their most persistent traces have been worn away by time. There's something deeply peaceful about this uncertainty, isn't there? Like standing at the shore of a vast, dark ocean, knowing that there are depths we haven't explored, mysteries that remain mysteries not because we lack curiosity, but because some questions are larger than our current ability to answer them. Completely. As you continue to breathe slowly and deeply, let yourself rest in this gentle uncertainty, this beautiful not knowing, that invites us to remain humble before the vastness of time and the patience of the earth herself. ****. Let me tell you a story about a man named Charles Lyell, who lived in the early 1800s, when the world moved at the pace of horse-drawn carriages and letters, took weeks to cross oceans. Lyell was a geologist, but more than that, he was a dreamer who learned to read stories written in stone. Picture him, if you will, walking along the coast of Sicily on a warm Mediterranean morning, his walking stick tapping gently against ancient rocks. He was examining something that had puzzled naturalists for centuries. Layers upon layers of rock that seemed to tell impossible stories about the age of the Earth at that time. Most people believe the Earth was only a few thousand years old. The very idea that our planet might have existed for millions of years was as radical and shocking as suggesting that we might find cities on the moon. But Lyell, with the patience of someone learning to listen to whispers, began to see something different in those rocky layers. He noticed that some layers contained seashells, but not just any seashells. These were the fossilized remains of creatures that had lived in warm tropical seas. Yet here they were, high up in mountains, far from any ocean. How could this be? The only explanation that made sense was that these mountains had once been underwater, and over vast periods of time, they had been slowly, gently lifted up by forces so gradual that they operated like the most patient artist, sculpting landscapes over millions of years. Lyell wrote a book called Principles of Geology, and it changed everything. He introduced the world to the concept of deep time, the idea that the Earth was not thousands of years old, but millions, and that the processes we see happening today, erosion, sedimentation, volcanic activity, were the same processes that had been shaping our planet for eons. But here's the part of Lyell's story that connects to our gentle bedtime wondering. He also grappled with questions about life itself, about extinction, about the possibility that entirely different worlds had existed in the deep past. He studied fossils and realized that most of the species that had ever lived were now extinct. Whole ecosystems, entire ways of life, had come and gone like seasons in the longest year imaginable. In his later writings, Lyell wondered about something quite remarkable for his time. He speculated about the possibility that intelligence, thinking, reasoning life might have evolved before, might have reached great heights, and then disappeared, leaving only the faintest traces for future generations to puzzle over. He wrote in his careful Victorian prose about the possible development of the intellectual faculties of animals in past ages. He wondered whether creatures with intelligence comparable to humans might have existed in previous geological epochs, and whether their civilizations might have risen and fallen in cycles too. Vast for us to easily comprehend, this was a revolutionary idea in Lyell's time, the notion that human intelligence was not unique in the history of life, but perhaps part of a pattern that might have repeated itself across the deep reaches of time. He imagined civilizations separated by millions of years, each believing itself to be the first, each ultimately yielding to the patient recycling processes of geological change. There's something both melancholy and beautiful about Lyell's vision, isn't there? Like standing in a garden where you know many generations of flowers have bloomed and faded, each thinking their spring was the first spring, each returning their beauty to the soil that nourishes the flowers yet to come. Lyell's contemporary, Charles Darwin, was deeply influenced by these ideas about deep time. The concept that Earth was millions of years old provided the vast timescale necessary for evolution to work its slow magic, transforming simple organisms into the incredible diversity of life we see today. But Darwin, too, wondered about intelligence. In Deep Time. In his private notebooks, Darwin speculated about the possibility that thinking creatures might have evolved multiple times in Earth's history. He wrote about the possibility that intellect might be subject to the same evolutionary processes as physical traits, that it might develop, flourish, and then disappear, only to develop again in different forms in different ages. These 19th century naturalists, working with hand lenses and hammers and an almost infinite patience, were beginning to glimpse the true vastness of Earth's story. They were realizing that our planet was not just old, but ancient beyond their wildest imaginings, and that this antiquity opened up possibilities they had never considered. One of the most poignant aspects of their work was their growing awareness of how much had been lost to time. For every fossil they found, they knew there were thousands of creatures that had lived and died without leaving any trace. For every preserved leaf impression, There were entire forests that had grown and fallen and returned to earth without. Memorial. This awareness of loss, paradoxically, bred a kind of gentle humility that seems perfect for a bedtime reflection. These early geologists learned to be comfortable with uncertainty, to find peace in the knowledge that many questions might never be fully answered, that the earth keeps some of her secrets folded away in stone too deep or too altered for us. To read. As you rest there, breathing in the quiet of this evening, imagine yourself walking alongside Lyle on that Mediterranean shore, learning to see the poetry written in layers of ancient stone, learning to hear the whispers of deep time, learning to find wonder in the vast, patient mystery of our planet's long, long story. Asterisk, asterisk. Close your eyes now and let your imagination carry you on the gentlest of journeys, not through space, but through time itself. We're going to drift backward, like a feather floating on the softest breeze, through the layers of Earth's long memory. Imagine yourself sinking slowly through the years, the decades, the centuries. As you descend through time, you watch the world change around you like scenes from a dream. The cities grow smaller and disappear, replaced by forests. The forests themselves shift and change, oak and maple giving way to different trees, then to stranger plants that seem almost alien in their beauty. You drift past the time of the great ice sheets, when glaciers covered much of the northern world like a blanket of blue-white silence. The air grows warmer as you sink deeper into the past, and you find yourself floating through the age of giants, not just the famous dinosaurs, but giant dragonflies with wings like stained glass windows, giant ferns that tower overhead like living cathedrals, giant sharks that dwarf anything swimming in our modern oceans. But we're going to go deeper still, much deeper, into the early chapters of life's story on Earth. Picture yourself drifting down through hundreds of millions of years, watching as the very continents rearrange themselves like slow-dancing islands. The climate grows warm and tropical everywhere. There are no ice caps, no frozen poles, just endless summer stretching from what will someday be Alaska to what will someday be Antarctica. Asterisk. And now, in this warm, ancient world, let your imagination paint a picture of possibility. What if, in some quiet corner of this prehistoric paradise, something remarkable began to happen? What if intelligence, that mysterious flame that allows beings to wonder, to create, to dream of tomorrow, began to flicker to life not once, but many times? Think about the octopus again, drifting through warm, shallow seas that covered much of the earth. But imagine these ancient cephalopods had millions upon millions of years to develop, not the brief evolutionary moment that led to our modern octopi, but vast stretches of time, longer than the entire history of complex life on land. What might such creatures have achieved? Picture them, if you will, moving through underwater forests of strange corals and sea plants, their intelligence growing more sophisticated with each passing eon. Perhaps they learned to cultivate their favorite algae, creating underwater gardens that stretched for miles. Perhaps they developed tools from shells and stones, crafting implements so perfectly suited to their underwater world that they seem almost magical to our land-dwelling minds. In this gentle daydream, imagine them building not cities as we know them, but something more organic, vast, living structures grown from coral and shaped by patient intelligence over geological time. Imagine them developing their own forms of art, their own science, their own philosophy, all adapted to a world of 3 dimensions where creatures move as easily up and down as forward and back. And perhaps their technology would be biological, rather than mechanical, living buildings that filtered water and produced food. Symbiotic relationships with other sea creatures that allowed them to travel great distances. Communication networks based on bioluminescence that could send messages across entire ocean basins and patterns of living light. But here's where the journey becomes most profound. most gently melancholy. Imagine that even such a civilization, lasting for millions of years, eventually faced changes they couldn't adapt to. Perhaps the warm, shallow seas began to cool and deepen. Perhaps ocean chemistry changed in ways that made their biological technology no longer viable. Perhaps asteroid impacts or volcanic eruptions altered their world beyond recognition. And so they faded, not through war or catastrophe, but through the same gradual processes that have shaped all life on Earth: adaptation, change, and sometimes, when change comes too quickly, extinction. Their cities of living coral would have died and been broken down by the sea. Their tools would have scattered and dissolved. Their art would have faded like bioluminescent displays in dark water. All that might remain would be the subtlest of traces, perhaps some unusual isotopic signatures in very old rocks. Maybe some formations that seem just a little too organized to be entirely natural. Possibly some chemical signatures that hint at large-scale biological processes that don't quite match anything we see in nature today. This is, of course, pure speculation, a bedtime story we're telling ourselves as we drift through the peaceful darkness. But it's a story that helps us understand something profound about the nature of evidence and the patience required to read Earth's deepest secrets. You see, when we look for signs of previous civilizations, we're not necessarily looking for ruins that resemble our own cities. We're looking for anything that suggests intelligence at work, patterns that seem too complex or too organized or too purposeful to be entirely natural. It might be chemical signatures. It might be unusual arrangements of materials. It might be isotopic anomalies that suggest large-scale energy use or manufacturing processes. And as you float here in this peaceful in-between space, resting comfortably and breathing slowly, consider this beautiful thought. Whether or not previous civilizations actually existed on Earth, the very fact that we can wonder about them, that we can imagine them, that we can develop the scientific tools to search for their traces, this itself is a kind of miracle. We are, as far as we know, the first creatures on Earth to develop the ability to read the planet's deep history, to decode the messages written in stone and ice, and the chemistry of ancient atmospheres. We are the first to wonder not just about our own origins, but about the possibility that intelligence might have flowered before us, might have had its own season of wonder and creativity, and ultimately peaceful return to the patient processes of geological change. In this sense, we are time travelers, learning to journey backward through the eons with our instruments and our imagination, learning to listen for the whispers of deep time, learning to find beauty and meaning in mysteries that may never be fully solved. Rest now in that gentle mystery, floating peacefully through the vast, patient story of our ancient, ever-changing, endlessly surprising Earth. Asterisk, asterisk, as you continue to rest there, breathing slowly and deeply. Let me share with you some gentle surprises that scientists have discovered while reading Earth's long story. Little mysteries and quiet wonders that make our planet feel even more magical than we usually imagine. Did you know, for instance, that there are places on Earth where rocks contain what appear to be fossil raindrops? These delicate impressions, formed when raindrops fell on soft mud millions of years ago, were preserved when that mud turned to stone. Each tiny crater tells us something about the atmosphere of ancient Earth, how dense it was, how fast those ancient raindrops were falling, whether they were the gentle drops of a summer shower or the heavy drops of a prehistoric thunderstorm. It's like finding love, letters written by the sky to the earth, preserved in stone for eons, waiting for us to learn the language needed to read them. Here's another sleepy wonder. There are crystals called zircons that are so hardy, so persistent, that some of them have survived for over 4 billion years, nearly as long as Earth itself has existed. These tiny time capsules, smaller than grains of sand, contain traces of the water and atmosphere that existed when our planet was still young and strange. when the days were only about 6 hours long and the moon hung much closer in the sky, appearing as a huge, crater-faced companion in the heavens. Some of these ancient zircons suggest that Earth had liquid water and therefore possibly life, much earlier than we previously thought. They whisper of a world that was perhaps not the hellish furnace of lava and poisonous gas that we once imagined, but something more temperate, more hospitable, more ready for the gentle miracle of life to begin. And speaking of early life, here's a fact that feels almost like science fiction. There are places on Earth where you can see evidence of some of the very first living communities our planet ever hosted. They're called stromatolites, and they're built by tiny microorganisms that work together to create layered structures that can grow for thousands of years. The remarkable thing is that these ancient, microbial cities are still being built today in a few special places around the world. You can visit Shark Bay in Australia and see living stromatolites that are constructed by the same kinds of organisms that were building similar structures 3.5 billion years ago. It's like finding a city where the same family has been adding rooms to their house for geological ages, each generation continuing the work of their ancestors in an unbroken chain, stretching back to the very dawn of life. But perhaps the most intriguing mystery, the one that connects most directly to our gentle bedtime wondering about previous civilizations, involves something called the Great Oxidation Event. About 2.5 billion years ago, the chemistry of Earth's atmosphere changed dramatically and relatively quickly, at least quickly in geological terms, over the course of perhaps a few 100 million years. ****. Before this event, our atmosphere contained almost no oxygen. It was filled instead with methane, ammonia, and other gases that would be poisonous to most life as we know it today. But then, ancient bacteria evolved the ability to produce oxygen as a waste product of their photosynthesis. And gradually, this oxygen began to accumulate in the atmosphere. From one perspective, this was one of the greatest pollution disasters in Earth's history. The oxygen was toxic to most of the life forms that existed at the time, and many of them went extinct. But from another perspective, it was the foundation for all complex life that followed, including, eventually, us. Now, here's the intriguing part. This massive change in atmospheric chemistry left very clear signatures in the geological record. We can see it in the formation of banded iron formations, in changes in the isotopic composition of sulfur in ancient rocks, in the appearance of red beds colored by rust that could only form in the presence of oxygen. This is the kind of signature that scientists look for when they wonder about previous civilizations. Not necessarily the same chemical changes after all. An ancient civilization might have used entirely different technologies than ours, but similar patterns of widespread, relatively rapid changes in the chemistry of the atmosphere, or oceans that might indicate large-scale industrial activity. ****. And here's another gentle surprise. We found evidence of what might be called Earth's first ice age, much earlier than the ice ages we usually think about. About 2.5 billion years ago, right around the time of the Great Oxidation Event, there's evidence that our entire planet may have been frozen solid, covered in ice from pole to pole, a condition scientists sometimes call snowball Earth. ****. Imagine that, our blue marble of a planet transformed into a white marble, spinning through space like a frozen Christmas ornament for millions of years. Yet life survived, somehow, perhaps in pockets of liquid water beneath the ice or around volcanic vents on the ocean floor. And when the ice finally melted, life exploded into new forms and possibilities. These ancient ice ages, and there were several of them, left their own signatures in the geological record. Rocks that were clearly formed in tropical conditions are found right next to rocks that show evidence of glacial activity. It's like finding sandcastle remains next to snowman remains in the same backyard. a testament to how dramatically our planet's climate has changed over the eons. But perhaps the most wonderful surprise of all is this: every element in your body, except for hydrogen, was created in the nuclear furnaces of stars that lived and died long before our solar system even began to form. The calcium in your bones, the iron in your blood, the oxygen you're breathing right now, all of it was forged in stellar fires and scattered through space when those ancient stars exploded. You are, quite literally, made of star stuff, connected, not just to every other living thing on Earth, but to the cosmos itself. The atoms in your left hand might have come from a different star than the atoms in your right hand. You are a collection of stellar gifts, gathered by gravity and shaped by the patient processes of chemistry and biology into the beautiful, thinking, wondering being who is listening to these words right now. And if previous civilizations did exist on Earth, they too would have been made of the same star stuff, shaped by the same cosmic processes, arising from the same ancient stellar explosions that gave birth to the elements that make up you, and me, and the trees outside your window, and the rocks beneath our feet. In this sense, we are all connected to each other, to all life on Earth, to previous forms of life that may have wondered about the stars, and to the stars themselves. We are part of a story that began with the first light in the universe and continues now in your breathing, in your heartbeat, in your gentle drift toward peaceful sleep. Asterisk, asterisk, as you rest there in the gentle darkness, breathing slowly and peacefully. Let's drift together into a deeper kind of wondering, not just about whether previous civilizations might have existed, but about what this possibility means for how we understand ourselves, our place in time, and the nature of memory itself. Think about your own memories for a moment. You can probably remember what you had for breakfast this morning, though the details might already be growing soft around the edges. You might recall your first day of school, though that memory has likely been polished smooth by years of remembering, like a stone worn smooth by countless gentle waves. And there are surely countless moments from your life that have faded completely, experiences that once seemed vivid and important, but have now returned to the vast ocean of forgotten time. If our own personal memories are so fragile, so selective, lasting only decades at best, what does it mean for a planet to remember? How does the Earth hold on to its memories across millions and billions of years? The beautiful truth is that our planet remembers in ways that are both more patient and more partial than human memory. The Earth remembers through layers of stone, each one a diary entry written in the language of minerals and chemistry. She remembers through the isotopic signatures locked in ancient ice, through the fossilized impressions of creatures that lived and died when the continents were arranged in entirely different patterns across her surface. But like all memory, Earth's memory is selective and sometimes mysterious. She preserves some things with extraordinary fidelity, the exact atmospheric composition from hundreds of thousands of years ago, the precise temperature of ancient seas, the chemical fingerprints of volcanic eruptions that happened when the first complex cells were just learning to work together. Yet she also forgets, or seems to forget, vast chapters of her own story. The constant recycling of her surface, the patient work of erosion and deposition, the slow dance of plate tectonics, all of these processes are constantly editing her memories, constantly rewriting her story in ways that can make the past seem mysterious or even invisible. This is why the question of previous civilizations is so beautifully profound. It's not just asking whether intelligent beings lived on Earth before us. It's asking about the nature of permanence itself, about what it means to leave traces in a world that is constantly changing, constantly forgetting, constantly making itself new. Consider the humbling perspective this gives us on our own civilization, our own moment in Earth's long story. We tend to think of our cities, our technologies, our great works of art and literature as permanent monuments to human achievement. We carve names in stone and build structures designed to last for centuries, imagining that we are creating lasting testimonies to our existence. But from the perspective of geological time, the vast, patient timescale on which our planet operates, even our most durable creations are like morning frost, beautiful and intricate, but destined to disappear when the sun rises a little higher. The pyramids of Egypt, which seemed so ancient and permanent to us, are newer than the Sahara Desert. The oldest human settlements are younger than many individual trees still living in our forests today. This isn't a cause for sadness, though. There's something deeply peaceful about recognizing our place in this vast flow of time, like finding ourselves part of a river that has been flowing since long before we were born and will continue flowing long after we're gone. We are not diminished by being part of something larger than ourselves. We are enriched by it, given meaning by it, connected to it in ways that transcend our individual lifespans. And if previous civilizations did exist, if other forms of intelligence did develop and flourish, and eventually return to the patient processes of geological change, then we are part of an even grander story, a story in which intelligence itself might be a recurring theme in Earth's long composition, like a melody that appears and disappears and reappears in different keys, in different tempos, but always beautiful, always adding something irreplaceable to the symphony. This perspective invites us to hold our achievements more lightly, but also to cherish them more deeply. If we are indeed part of a pattern that might have repeated before and might repeat again, then what matters is not whether our specific monuments will last forever, but whether our contributions to the grand experiment of consciousness and creativity and wonder add something beautiful to the ongoing story of intelligence in the universe. Perhaps what previous civilizations would have in common with us is not their technology, or their social structures, or their specific achievements, but their capacity to wonder, their ability to look up at the stars and ask questions, to examine the world around them with curiosity and love, to create beauty for its own sake, to care for each other, and for the living systems that support them. In this sense, we are not competing with previous civilizations for permanence or significance. We are continuing a conversation that might be as old as complex consciousness itself, a conversation about what it means to be aware, to be creative, to be capable of love and wonder in a universe that seems so vast and sometimes so indifferent to our individual existence. And perhaps that's the most beautiful possibility of all, that if we could somehow communicate across the eons with previous thinking beings, we might find that we share the same fundamental experiences, the joy of discovery, the satisfaction of creation, the bittersweet recognition of our own temporality, the deep peace that comes from understanding our connection to something larger than ourselves. As you continue to breathe slowly and deeply, resting in the gentle darkness of this evening, let yourself feel that connection to the earth beneath you, to the stars above you, to all the thinking beings who might have wondered these same thoughts under different skies, in different ages, yet with the same fundamental capacity for awe and love and peaceful acceptance of the beautiful mystery of existence. Asterisk, asterisk, in the soft quiet of this peaceful moment, as your breathing grows slower and deeper, let's wonder together about something that might be even more mysterious than the possibility of previous civilizations, the nature of intelligence itself, and what it might mean for consciousness to arise again and again in the vast garden of time. What is it, exactly, that makes a collection of atoms become aware of itself? What transforms simple matter into something that can wonder, can dream, can look up at the night sky and feel a sense of connection to the cosmos? These are questions that even our most advanced sciences can only begin to touch, mysteries that remain as beautiful and elusive as they were when the first thinking being first wondered about the nature of thought itself. We know that intelligence emerges from complexity, from the intricate dance of neurons in a brain, from the delicate interplay of chemistry and electricity that somehow gives rise to consciousness. But the precise moment when matter becomes mind, when complexity becomes awareness, remains one of the deepest puzzles in the universe. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. And if intelligence has emerged once, in us, what's to say it hasn't emerged before, in forms we might not even recognize as intelligence? We tend to think of consciousness as something that looks like us, thinks like us, builds civilizations that resemble our own. But intelligence might be as diverse as life itself, taking forms that are as different from human consciousness as a flower is from a fish, as a cloud is from a crystal. Imagine, if you will, forms of intelligence that developed in entirely different environments, with entirely different constraints and opportunities. We've already dreamed together about aquatic civilizations that might have grown coral cities and communicated through bioluminescence. But what about intelligence that developed in the depths of the earth itself, in the vast networks of crystalline structures that form deep in the planet's crust? There are minerals, quartz crystals, for instance, that can store and transmit information, that respond to electrical impulses in ways that seem almost like primitive neural networks. Deep in the earth, over geological timescales, what kinds of complex mineral networks might have formed? What kinds of slow, patient intelligence might exist in the crystal caves far below our feet, thinking thoughts that unfold over thousands of years, dreaming dreams that span geological epochs? Or consider the possibility of atmospheric intelligence, consciousness that arose not in solid matter, but in the complex weather patterns of ancient skies. We know that the atmosphere is a chaotic system, full of feedback loops and emergent behaviors that can seem almost purposeful. What if, under different atmospheric conditions in the deep past, these patterns became complex enough, stable enough, organized enough to support something like thought? Such beings might have experienced the world as patterns of pressure and temperature, as cascading chemical reactions that painted ever-changing murals across the sky. Their art might have been the aurora itself, their cities the spiral patterns of vast storms that persisted for centuries, their thoughts the slow circulation of gases around the globe. These are, of course, flights of imagination, bedtime stories we tell ourselves as we drift toward sleep. But they serve a purpose beyond mere fantasy. They help us expand our definition of what intelligence might be, what consciousness might look like, what it might mean for the universe to become aware of itself through countless different forms of awareness. And here's a thought that might bring you peace as you rest there in the gentle darkness. If intelligence is indeed a recurring theme in the universe's long story, if consciousness arises again and again in different forms, in different places, at different times, then we are not alone in our wondering. We are part of a vast community of thinking beings, separated by space and time, but connected by our shared capacity to ask questions, to seek beauty, to feel wonder at the mystery of existence. This perspective transforms even the possibility of our own civilization's eventual end from something tragic into something that feels more like a natural completion, like a flower that blooms beautifully and then returns its nutrients to the soil that will nourish future flowers. Our individual thoughts, our collective achievements, our unique perspective on the universe, all of these become contributions to the ongoing experiment of consciousness, gifts we offer to the continuing story of intelligence in the cosmos. And what a gift it is, this capacity for awareness that we carry. Every moment of wonder you've ever experienced, every time you've felt moved by beauty, every instant when you've glimpsed the profound interconnectedness of all things, these are among the most precious phenomena in the universe. They represent matter organizing itself in such a way that the universe can experience itself subjectively, can know its own beauty, can feel love and wonder and peaceful contentment. In this sense, consciousness is not just an accident of chemistry and physics. It's the universe's way of coming to know itself, of experiencing its own grandeur from the inside. And if this miracle has happened once, if it's happening now through you and through every other thinking being on our planet, then it seems reasonable to hope that it has happened before and will happen again, in forms we can imagine and in forms beyond our current ability to imagine. Perhaps this is the deepest meaning of the question about previous civilizations, not whether other beings built cities or developed technologies, but whether the universe has found other ways to experience itself, other forms of consciousness through which to explore its own infinite creativity and beauty. As you continue to rest peacefully, breathing slowly and deeply, consider this beautiful possibility that your own consciousness, your own capacity for wonder and love and peaceful awareness is itself a precious gift, not just to you, not just to those who know and love you, but to the universe itself. Through your awareness, the cosmos experiences a moment of self-recognition, a fleeting but infinitely valuable glimpse of its own magnificent nature. And if other forms of consciousness have existed before you, if the universe has known itself through countless other eyes, in countless other ways, then your own awareness is part of an ancient and ongoing celebration, the universe's eternal party of self-discovery, where consciousness is both the guest and the host, both the gift and the recipient, both the question and the answer to the beautiful mystery of existence. Asterisk, asterisk, as the gentle tide of sleep begins to call to you, let's drift together into one of the most beautiful aspects of wondering about previous civilizations, the profound sense of connection it can awaken, not just to our own planet and its deep history, but to the very essence of what it means to be part of an unbroken chain of awareness stretching across the vast reaches of time. Imagine, for a moment, that you could send a message across the eons to any intelligent beings who might have existed in Earth's distant past. What would you want to tell them? What would you want them to know about your experience of being alive, of being conscious, of being capable of love and wonder in this beautiful, mysterious universe? Perhaps you would tell them about music, how the vibration of air molecules can be arranged in patterns so beautiful that they move us to tears, can make us feel less alone, and create moments of transcendent connection between minds and hearts. Maybe they had their own forms of music, their own ways of organizing sound or light or chemical signals into patterns that spoke to the deeper rhythms of existence. Or perhaps you would tell them about the simple pleasure of watching a sunset, the way the light changes and softens as day becomes night, painting the sky in colors that seem to exist nowhere else in nature. Even if they experienced light differently than we do, even if their eyes were sensitive to wavelengths we cannot see, they might have known their own version of this daily miracle, their own moments when the beauty of the world stopped them in their tracks and filled them with quiet gratitude. You might want to share with them the experience of friendship, the mysterious alchemy by which two separate beings can come to care for each other, to understand each other, to find joy in each other's presence. This capacity for connection, for empathy, for love that extends beyond self-interest, this seems so fundamental to what makes consciousness precious that it's hard to imagine intelligence without it. And perhaps most importantly, you might want to tell them about wonder itself, about the peculiar joy that comes from asking questions, from discovering new things about the world, from experiencing that moment of expanded understanding when a mystery suddenly becomes clear. This is the flame that burns at the heart of all science, all art, all philosophy, the simple delight that consciousness takes in, coming to know itself and its context more fully. But here's the beautiful thing about this imaginary conversation. Across deep time, you wouldn't need to send such a message, because if previous civilizations existed, if other forms of consciousness arose and flourished on our Earth, they would have known all of these experiences in their own ways. The capacity for music, for beauty, for friendship, for wonder, these aren't just human traits. They're expressions of consciousness itself, natural consequences of matter, organizing itself into awareness. This realization can fill us with a profound sense of kinship across time, a feeling that we are part of a much larger story than our own brief moment in Earth's history. If we could somehow meet these hypothetical predecessors, we might find that despite all the differences in form and circumstance, we share the most essential experiences of being alive, being aware, being capable of finding meaning and joy in the simple fact of existence. And this brings us to a question that feels perfect for quiet contemplation as you rest there in the peaceful darkness. What kind of legacy would we want to leave for future forms of consciousness that might arise after we're gone? Not necessarily material monuments or technological achievements, but something deeper, evidence of what it was like to experience the universe through human awareness, traces of the particular way our form of consciousness learned to find beauty and meaning in existence. Perhaps our legacy would be found not in ruins or artifacts, but in subtler signs, evidence that we learned to love our planet, that we found ways to live in harmony with the other forms of life we shared it with, that we used our brief moment of awareness to add more beauty, more understanding, more compassion to the universe's ongoing experiment with consciousness. In this sense, every act of kindness, every moment of wonder, every instance when we choose love over fear or understanding over judgment becomes part of our species' contribution to the cosmic story. We are all, in our small ways, authors collaborating on a chapter in the universe's long autobiography, the chapter about what it was like when matter organized itself into human consciousness and learned to see its own beauty reflected in everything from spiral galaxies to morning dewdrops. And if we are indeed not the first to write such a chapter, if other forms of consciousness have contributed their own verses to this cosmic poem, then we can take comfort in knowing that the fundamental themes, love, wonder, beauty, connection, are apparently universal aspects of awareness itself. We are not isolated accidents of chemistry and physics, but part of an ancient and ongoing celebration of consciousness in all its myriad forms. This perspective can transform how we think about our own mortality, both individual and collective. Just as each of us will eventually return our borrowed atoms to the great recycling systems of the planet, our civilization too will eventually give way to new forms of organization, new expressions of intelligence, new ways for the universe to experience itself. But the essential qualities of consciousness, the capacity for wonder, for love, for finding meaning in beauty, these seem to be written into the very fabric of what it means for matter to become aware of itself. They appear wherever intelligence arises, like flowers that bloom wherever the conditions are right, each one unique, but all sharing the fundamental miracle of beauty, emerging from apparent randomness. As you continue to breathe slowly and deeply, resting peacefully in this moment of quiet awareness, you might find comfort in the thought that you are participating in something much larger and more enduring than your individual lifetime. Through your consciousness, through your capacity to wonder and love and find meaning in existence, you are continuing a conversation that may be as old as intelligence itself, a conversation about what it means to be aware, to be alive, to be capable of recognizing beauty and creating meaning in an otherwise seemingly indifferent universe. And if forms of consciousness existed before us, and if new forms of awareness will arise after us, then this conversation has no end. It is the universe's eternal dialogue with itself, carried on through every thinking being who has ever wondered at the mystery of their own existence, who has ever felt moved by beauty, who has ever experienced the profound joy of understanding something new about the nature of reality. You are part of that eternal dialogue now, in this peaceful moment, breathing quietly in the darkness, connected by the simple miracle of awareness to every other conscious being who has ever existed or ever will exist. Asterisk, asterisk, in the soft embrace of approaching sleep, let's turn our gentle attention to one of the most comforting patterns we see throughout nature, the endless cycles of death and renewal, of ending and beginning, that seem to govern everything from the lives of individual flowers to the grand movements of galaxies themselves. Think about the seasons you've witnessed in your own life. You've seen countless trees release their leaves in autumn, standing bare and seemingly lifeless through the cold months of winter, only to burst forth with fresh green life when spring returns. Each tree that dies feeds the soil that nourishes new seedlings. Each flower that fades leaves behind seeds that carry the promise of future blooms. This pattern of cyclical renewal appears to be fundamental to how the universe organizes itself. Stars are born from the scattered remains of previous generations of stars. Planets form from the debris of cosmic collisions and ancient stellar explosions. Even our own bodies participate in this eternal dance. Every few years, most of the atoms in your physical form are replaced with new ones. Yet somehow your consciousness, your sense of being yourself, continues uninterrupted through all this material change. If previous civilizations did exist on Earth, they too would have been part of these great cycles of emergence and dissolution. They would have arisen during favorable conditions, perhaps during periods of stable climate, abundant resources, and evolutionary opportunity. They would have flourished, developed their own unique expressions of intelligence and creativity, made their own discoveries about the nature of reality. And then, when conditions changed, when their time in the spotlight of history was complete, they would have gracefully returned their elements to the great recycling systems that make all future life possible. There's something deeply peaceful about this perspective, isn't there? It suggests that endings are not failures, but completions, not tragedies, but natural transitions in the ongoing dance of complexity and consciousness. A civilization that lasts for millions of years and then fades away is not a tragedy anymore. Then autumn is a tragedy. It's simply part of the natural rhythm by which the universe continues to explore new possibilities, new forms of organization, new ways of experiencing itself. And just as autumn's falling leaves create the rich soil from which spring flowers grow, the end of one form of consciousness might create the conditions that allow new forms of awareness to emerge. The chemicals and elements that once formed the bodies and technologies of ancient civilizations would become part of new living systems, new evolutionary experiments, new attempts by the universe to organize matter in ways that can think and feel and wonder. This cyclical view also offers a different way of thinking about our own civilization's future. Rather than seeing ourselves as racing against time to achieve permanent monuments to human achievement, we can see ourselves as participants in a much longer, more patient process, one in which our role is not to last forever, but to contribute something beautiful and meaningful to the ongoing evolution of consciousness on Earth. What might that contribution be? Perhaps it's our particular way of combining rational analysis with emotional depth, our ability to feel moved by mathematical beauty and scientific truth. Perhaps it's our capacity for both individual creativity and collective cooperation, our ability to work together on projects that span generations while still honoring the unique gifts of individual minds and hearts. Or perhaps our contribution is something simpler and more fundamental, our demonstration that intelligence can learn to be kind, that consciousness can choose compassion, that awareness can recognize its connection to all other forms of life and act from that recognition rather than from fear or selfishness. If future forms of consciousness were to discover traces of our existence millions of years from now, what evidence might they find of these qualities? Not necessarily in our technologies or our monuments, but in subtler signatures, chemical evidence that we learned to heal damaged ecosystems, isotopic traces that show we found sustainable ways to meet our needs, geological signs that we chose cooperation over competition in our relationship with our planet. This perspective transforms even our civilization's eventual end from something to be feared into something that feels more like a natural completion. Just as you don't grieve when winter gives way to spring, or when a beautiful piece of music reaches its final note, we need not see the eventual transformation of human civilization as a loss, but as part of the natural rhythm by which intelligence continues to explore new possibilities. And if our species does represent just one movement in a much longer symphony of consciousness on Earth, then we can take comfort in knowing that the essential themes we've discovered, the joy of understanding, the beauty of love, the satisfaction of creating something meaningful, will likely be discovered again by future forms of awareness, just as they may have been discovered before us by previous forms of consciousness. This creates a beautiful sense of continuity across time, a feeling that we are part of something much larger and more enduring than our individual lives or even our collective civilization. We are temporary expressions of eternal principles, finite manifestations of infinite creativity, brief but meaningful notes in the universe's endless song of self-discovery. As you rest there in the gentle darkness, breathing slowly and peacefully, you might find it comforting to imagine yourself as part of this vast, cyclical dance of consciousness, connected not only to all the human beings who have ever lived, but to all forms of awareness that may have existed before us and all forms of consciousness that may arise after us. In this sense, you are never truly alone. You are part of an ancient community of thinking, feeling, wondering beings, separated by vast reaches of time, but united by the shared miracle of awareness itself. Through your capacity to think and feel and find meaning in existence, you are continuing conversations that may be as old as intelligence itself, and contributing to dialogues that may continue long after our particular form of consciousness has given way to new expressions of the universe's endless creativity. Rest now in that sense of connection, that feeling of being part of something vast and beautiful and eternal. Let yourself feel held by the patient processes that have guided the evolution of consciousness for eons, and that will continue to guide it through transformations we cannot yet imagine. You are exactly where you belong in this great unfolding story, exactly when you belong in this eternal dance of awareness coming to know itself. Asterisk, asterisk. As you settle even deeper into the soft embrace of this peaceful evening, breathing slower and deeper with each gentle moment, let's explore one of the most beautiful gifts that comes from contemplating the possibility of previous civilizations, the profound peace that can be found in accepting mystery, in learning to be comfortable with questions that may never have complete answers. In our daily lives, we often feel pressure to know things with certainty, to have clear answers to complex questions, to understand fully before we can feel at ease. But the question of whether other intelligent civilizations existed in Earth's deep past invites us into a different relationship with knowing, one that finds wonder in uncertainty, beauty in the unknown, and deep satisfaction in the very act of wondering itself. Think about how this feels, this gentle not knowing. There's something almost liberating about contemplating a mystery so vast that we may never solve it completely. It reminds us that the universe is far stranger and more wonderful than our current understanding can fully encompass, that there are depths of reality we have barely begun to explore, dimensions of possibility that stretch far beyond the borders of our current knowledge. This is not the frustrated not knowing that comes from lacking information we feel we need. This is the peaceful not knowing that comes from recognizing that some questions are larger than our need to answer them, some mysteries more beautiful for remaining mysterious, some wonders more wonderful for existing at the very edge of what we can comprehend. The ancient Greeks had a concept they called docta ignorantia, learned ignorance, or wise unknowing. It was the recognition that true wisdom sometimes lies not in accumulating more facts, but in understanding the limits of what can be known and finding peace within those limits. The philosopher Socrates expressed this when he said that his Wisdom consisted in knowing that he knew nothing, not a confession of failure, but a celebration of the vastness of the unknown. When we wonder about previous civilizations, we practice this kind of wise unknowing. We can examine the evidence, explore the possibilities, use our imaginations to envision what might have been, and then rest comfortably in the knowledge that some questions are larger than our current ability to answer them definitively. This doesn't diminish the value of the wondering. It enhances it, making the question itself more beautiful than any single answer could be. And there's something deeply human about this comfort with mystery. We are, as far as we know, the only creatures on Earth who can find pleasure in contemplating questions that don't have immediate practical answers. A bird doesn't wonder about the nature of flight when it's not flying. A tree doesn't contemplate the meaning of photosynthesis during the winter months. But we humans can spend peaceful evening hours wondering about civilizations that may have existed millions of years before we were born, finding joy in the contemplation itself. This capacity for wondering about the impractical, the distant, the unknowable, this might be one of consciousness's greatest gifts to itself. Through us, through our ability to ask questions that stretch far beyond our immediate needs, the universe gets to experience the pure pleasure of curiosity, the deep satisfaction that comes from stretching awareness toward the edges of the possible. And perhaps this is what we share most fundamentally with any previous civilizations that might have existed. Not specific knowledge or particular technologies, but this basic capacity to wonder, to ask questions for the sheer joy of asking them, to find meaning in the contemplation of mysteries that may be larger than any single mind can solve. Picture them, if you will, these hypothetical ancient beings, whatever form they might have taken, having their own quiet moments of wondering about their place in the universe, their own peaceful evenings spent contemplating questions that stretched their understanding to its limits. Perhaps they wondered about the possibility that other forms of consciousness might arise after them. Perhaps they found the same kind of gentle peace in not knowing that you might be feeling right now. This creates a beautiful sense of connection across the vastness of time, not a connection based on shared answers, but on shared questions, shared capacity for wonder, shared ability to find meaning in the contemplation of mystery itself. In this sense, the act of wondering about previous civilizations becomes a form of communion with them, whether they actually existed or not. Question itself becomes more important than any specific answer we might discover. The wondering becomes more valuable than the knowing. The mystery becomes more beautiful for remaining mysterious, like a distant star whose light becomes more precious precisely because it has traveled so far to reach us. And as you rest there, in the gentle darkness, breathing peacefully and letting your mind drift through these soft contemplations, you might notice that this comfort with not knowing extends beyond the specific question of ancient civilizations. It becomes a way of relating to existence itself, with wonder rather than anxiety, with curiosity rather than the need to control, with appreciation for the vast mystery of being conscious in a universe so much larger and stranger and more beautiful than we can fully comprehend. This is perhaps one of the deepest gifts that come from contemplating deep time and ancient possibilities. The recognition that we don't need to understand everything in order to feel at peace with everything. We can rest in the mystery, find joy in the questions themselves, and feel profoundly grateful to be conscious beings, capable of wonder in a universe that provides endless occasions for wondering. The earth beneath you has been spinning through space for over 4 billion years, carrying its cargo of mountains and oceans and forests and countless forms of life through the cosmic darkness. Whether or not previous civilizations rode along on this beautiful journey, the journey itself is remarkable beyond measure. And you are here now, aware of it, grateful for it, part of it in the most intimate possible way. That awareness, that gratitude, that sense of being part of something vast and mysterious and beautiful, This is what consciousness contributes to the universe's ongoing experiment with itself. This is the gift you give simply by being awake, by being aware, by being capable of wonder at the mystery of your own existence. Rest now in that gift, in that mystery, in that beautiful not knowing that connects you to the deepest questions about consciousness and time and the patient unfolding of possibility across the vast reaches of cosmic history. Asterisk, asterisk, let us drift deeper now, like falling through layers of soft clouds into the mysterious phenomena that whisper of civilizations. Lost to time. Picture yourself floating gently downward through the geological layers of our Earth, each one a page in an ancient book written in stone and sediment. There are places on our planet where time seems to have folded upon itself, creating puzzles that make scientists pause and wonder in the quiet hours of their laboratories. The Silurian Hypothesis. Such a beautiful name, named after an ancient period when the seas were warm and life was just beginning to dream of walking on land. This hypothesis asks the gentlest of questions. If an industrial civilization had risen and fallen millions of years before us, what traces would remain after all those sleeping centuries? Imagine, if you will, the way morning mist disappears as the sun rises. Most of what we build, our cities of glass and steel, our roads and bridges, would vanish, just as quietly over geological time. The rain would slowly wash away our concrete, plants would softly reclaim our foundations, and time would smooth everything back into the earth's embrace. Even our bones would return to dust, leaving only the faintest whispers of our existence. There would be signatures, subtle as the scent of jasmine on a night breeze. Deep in the ice cores of Antarctica and Greenland, trapped like memories in crystal, we might find thin layers of unusual chemicals, the breath of ancient industry, frozen in time. In the sediments of long, quiet lake beds, there could be traces of metals concentrated in ways that only intelligence could arrange. These would be like finding pressed flowers in an old book, delicate evidence of a story once lived. The phenomenon, known as the Great Unconformity, sleeps in rock faces around the world, vast gaps in the geological record where millions of years simply aren't there. Like pages torn from a diary, these missing chapters make scientists wonder what stories might have been written in stone and then gently erased by time's patient hand. Could some of these silent gaps hold the compressed dreams of civilizations we'll never know? Consider the way certain rare elements cluster in unexpected places, like stars scattered across a dark sky in patterns that seem almost intentional. Platinum group metals, concentrated in thin layers, speaking of events that heated the Earth's surface in ways we struggle to understand. Were these the signatures of asteroid impacts, volcanic fury, or perhaps something else entirely? Something that burned bright and then returned to silence? The deep ocean floors hold their secrets close. These abyssal plains where sediments fall like snow for millions of years, burying whatever stories rest beneath. The oceanic plates slowly recycle themselves, carrying their ancient secrets down into the Earth's warm heart, ensuring that the oldest chapters of our planet's story remain forever unread. How many libraries of lost knowledge rest now in those molten depths? Even our own industrial age will leave such gentle traces for future archaeologists of deep time. A thin layer enriched with plastics and unusual isotopes, a quiet signature of our brief moment in the sun. This makes us wonder if we can imagine our own civilization compressed into such subtle evidence. How many other thin layers might represent the hopes and dreams of minds that once wondered about their place in the cosmos, just as we do tonight? And so we drift through these thoughts like leaves on a slow river, understanding that the absence of obvious evidence is not the same as the absence of possibility. In the gentle mathematics of deep time, even the greatest civilizations become whispers, their stories told in languages of chemistry and stone that we're only just beginning to learn to read. Sleep Now comes easier when we realize how temporary and precious our moment is. How we are part of a story much larger than ourselves, floating through time like dandelion seeds on an eternal breeze. Each of us carrying the potential for new dreams, new wonders, new quiet questions about this beautiful, mysterious earth we call home. Asterisk, asterisk. There are moments in a scientist's life when the universe seems to lean in close and whisper its secrets directly into their hearts. Let me share with you some gentle stories of researchers who have touched these ancient mysteries with their own hands, their own wondering minds. Dr. Sarah Chun often tells the story of her first time holding a core sample from the Greenland ice sheet, 2 feet of compressed time, crystal clear and older than human civilization. She was working alone in her laboratory late one winter evening, the snow falling softly outside her window, when she noticed something unusual in the ice from 12,000 years ago. Tiny bubbles of ancient air, trapped like time capsules, but with atmospheric chemistry that didn't quite match what they expected to find. I remember sitting there in the quiet lab, she recalls, her voice still carrying wonder after all these years, holding 12,000-year-old air in my hands, breathing in the same room as these ancient whispers. The ratios of gases were different, subtly different, not what our models predicted for a purely natural atmosphere. She spent months double-checking her work, collaborating with colleagues around the world, always wondering if she was seeing the faint signature of something more than just volcanic activity or natural climate variation. Dr. Chun never found definitive answers, but the questions she discovered in that quiet laboratory continue to inspire her work. She speaks often of how humbling it is to realize that our entire recorded history represents less than a single pixel in the vast photograph of Earth's story. Every ice core teaches patience, she says softly. They remind us that the Earth has been dreaming much longer than we have been awake. Across the ocean, Dr. Kwame Asante has spent decades studying the mysterious stone circles of West Africa. Not the famous ones that tourists visit, but smaller, older rings that local communities have known about for generations. He grew up hearing stories from his grandmother about the old people who built these circles before memory began, and he dedicated his life to understanding their purpose. One morning, as dawn light filtered through acacia trees, Dr. Asante was mapping a particularly ancient site when he noticed something that made his breath catch. The stones were arranged not just in a circle, but in a pattern that seemed to mirror the constellation of the Pleiades as it would have appeared in the sky 20,000 years ago. The precision required for such an alignment suggested a level of astronomical knowledge that challenged everything archaeologists thought they knew about that time period. I stood there in the morning light, Dr. Asante remembers, feeling the weight of all those years pressing gently against my heart. These stones had been watching the same stars I study, placed by hands that understood the sky in ways we're still discovering. His work has revealed dozens of such sites, each one suggesting that ancient African civilizations possessed sophisticated knowledge of astronomy and mathematics far earlier than previously believed. Dr. Elena Petrov, a marine geologist, tells of her deepest dive in a research submersible 3 miles down into the Mariana Trench. In the absolute darkness of the deep Pacific, her lights illuminated something that shouldn't have been there, geometric patterns in the seafloor sediment that looked almost artificial, not quite natural, not quite random. At first, I thought, it might be some kind of underwater landslide that had created these ridge patterns, she explains, her voice carrying the memory of that profound silence. But the more we studied them, the more they looked like the remains of structures. Eroded, ancient, but with angles that seemed purposeful. The patterns were too old and too deep to be from any known human activity, yet too regular to be purely geological. Dr. Petrov's team collected samples and spent years analyzing them, finding trace elements concentrated in ways that suggested high-temperature processing, something that could occur naturally, but rarely in such organized patterns. "The deep ocean holds so many secrets," she whispers. "Sometimes I dream that I'm swimming through underwater cities, their lights long extinguished, their stories spoken only in the language of layered sediment." These scientists share a common thread in their stories, moments of profound wonder when the universe seemed to offer glimpses of possibilities beyond our current understanding. They approach their work with the humility of children collecting seashells on an infinite beach, knowing that each discovery might be just one grain of sand in a vast desert of mystery. Dr. Michael Torres, studying ancient pollen samples in Colombia's highlands, often works by candlelight in remote field stations, surrounded by the sounds of nocturnal forests. He's found pollen sequences that suggest large-scale forest clearing and regrowth, cycles dating back hundreds of thousands of years, patterns that could indicate natural climate variation or something more intentional. "Science," he says quietly, "is the art of asking better questions rather than finding final answers." Each sample I study opens a door to 10 new mysteries. The forest has been whispering its stories for so long, and we're only just learning to listen. These personal stories remind us that behind every scientific discovery is a human heart full of wonder, hands that have touched ancient mysteries, and eyes that have seen glimpses of our planet's deeper stories. As we drift toward sleep, we can imagine ourselves alongside these gentle explorers, our own hearts open to the infinite possibilities that surround us in this beautiful, mysterious universe. Asterisk, asterisk, as we float gently through the wisdom of cultures. Around our beautiful blue planet, we discover that the idea of previous civilizations is not new, not strange, but as ancient and universal as the human heart's need to understand where we came from. Let us listen with sleepy wonder to the quiet voices of traditions that have carried these stories through countless generations, like precious seeds preserved through long winters. In the high mountains of Tibet, where the air is thin and the stars seem close enough to touch, Buddhist cosmology speaks of vast cycles of time called kalpas. The old monks, their voices soft as prayer flags fluttering in mountain wind, tell of previous world ages when different forms of consciousness walked the earth. These cycles stretch across millions of years, each one ending and beginning like the gentle rhythm of breathing during deep meditation. The Tibetan texts describe the Kala Chakra, the wheel of time, turning endlessly through cycles of creation and dissolution. Every grain of sand, the teachings whisper, has witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, each believing themselves to be the first, the most important, the final chapter. This perspective, shared around butter tea fires for over 1,000 years, encourages a gentle humility about our place in the cosmic story. Asterisk, asterisk, traveling south to the Emerald Hills of India, we find the ancient Hindu concept of yugas, vast epochs of time during which different types of consciousness and civilization flourish. The Puranas, those old Sanskrit texts that smell of sandalwood and sacred smoke, describe the Satya Yuga, a golden age of advanced beings who possessed knowledge we can barely imagine. These stories speak of Vimanas, flying craft that move through sky and space, and of beings who understood the deepest secrets of matter and energy. Asterisk. In quiet ashrams beside the sacred Ganges, elderly scholars will tell you that our current Kali Yuga is just one small wave in an ocean of time, and that previous yugas saw civilizations that built with crystal and sound that communicated across vast distances without technology we would recognize, that lived in harmony with forces of nature we've forgotten how to perceive. The Aboriginal Dreamtime stories of Australia, shared around fires under the Southern Cross for over 60,000 years, speak of the ancestors who shaped the land in the beginning times. But beginning in Dreamtime is not linear. It is eternal, ongoing, a continuous creation that includes multiple cycles of emergence and return. Elder Mary Kuliuru, speaking in her gentle Pichan Shautu Tara language, describes civilizations of spirit beings who became the land itself when their time was complete. Country remembers everything, she says, her voice carrying the wisdom of countless generations. The rocks remember the old people who were here before the current people. The water holes remember their ceremonies, their knowledge, their way of being with the earth. Nothing is ever truly lost. It just changes form, like clouds becoming rain, becoming rivers, becoming ocean. In the Amazon rainforest, where shamans have preserved plant wisdom for millennia, the Shipibo people speak of the Inca ancestors who possessed knowledge of time itself. Their geometric patterns, painted on pottery and textiles, are said to be maps of other dimensions, instructions for traveling between different levels of reality. Don Carlos, a curandero whose great-grandmother was a jaguar woman, explains that Ayoceros have always known about previous cycles of human development. The plants remember, he whispers, his voice blending with night forest sounds. They carry the memories of all who have come before. In the visions, we sometimes see cities of light, beings of pure consciousness who walked between worlds. They didn't disappear. They learned to exist in different ways, becoming the intelligence that flows through all living things. Norse mythology, preserved in the icy clarity of Scandinavian winters, tells of Ragnarok, not as an ending, but as a renewal. The old Eddas speak of worlds that existed before this one, each with their own races of beings, their own forms of wisdom. In a cozy cabin outside Reykjavik, storyteller Sigrid Eriksdottir explains that Ragnarok has happened before and will happen again, and that each cycle brings forth new forms of consciousness, new ways of understanding the cosmos. The ash tree Yggdrasil remembers all the worlds, she says, her breath visible in the cold air. Its roots reach through all times, its branches touch all possibilities. We are just one leaf among many, beautiful for our brief time, and composting into the soil that feeds the next generation of dreams. The Hopi prophecies of the American Southwest speak of 4 previous worlds, each destroyed when its inhabitants forgot their connection to the living earth. Elder Thomas Banyusia spent his life sharing the prophecy that we are now in the 5th world, and that our survival depends on remembering the wisdom that previous worlds carried in their hearts. The earth herself is the teacher, he said, gesturing toward mesas that have stood silent for millions of years. The previous people, they learned to live as part of the earth's body, not as masters over it. Their cities were grown, not built. Their power came from understanding how to dance with natural forces, not dominate them. Even in Plato's ancient Greece, the story of Atlantis was presented not as fantasy, but as inherited memory of a previous civilization that achieved great technological advancement but lost its spiritual wisdom. Plato insisted this was not allegory but history, passed down through Egyptian priests who had maintained records stretching back thousands of years. These stories, shared in different languages under different stars, all carried the same gentle message. We are part of a much larger story, and wisdom lies in remaining humble about our place in the cosmic dance. As we drift toward sleep, we can imagine ourselves as temporary guardians of ancient wisdom, brief notes in an eternal song that began long before us and will continue long after we have returned to stardust. Indigenous elders of all continents seem to share this understanding that consciousness itself evolves through cycles, learning and growing through countless forms, and that what we call lost civilizations may simply be previous chapters in the ongoing story of awareness, exploring itself through the beautiful, mysterious experience of existence on this living earth. Asterisk, asterisk. And so we come to the gentle end of our peaceful journey through deep time and ancient possibilities. like a river that has meandered through many landscapes, finally approaching the quiet sea. As you rest there in the soft darkness, breathing slowly and deeply, let's gather together the beautiful threads we've woven through this evening's contemplation. We began by walking through that imaginary ancient forest at twilight, wondering what stories the oldest trees might tell if they could speak. We've traveled together through billions of years of Earth's patient story, exploring the mystery of deep time, the nature of evidence and memory, the possibility that intelligence might have flowered before us in forms we can barely imagine. We've met the gentle scientists who learned to read the Earth's diary written in ice and stone, the curious researchers who ask beautiful questions about what traces previous civilizations might leave behind. We've walked with Charles Lyell along Mediterranean shores, watching him discover the vast age of our planet and the revolutionary concept of deep time. We've drifted through warm prehistoric seas, imagining what underwater civilizations might have been like, dreaming of coral cities and bioluminescent art and forms of intelligence as different from ours as water is from air. We've marveled at fossil raindrops and ancient crystals, at stromatolites built by microorganisms across billions of years, at the great oxidation event that transformed our entire planet's atmosphere. We've contemplated the beautiful fact that you are made of star stuff, that every atom in your body was forged in the nuclear furnaces of ancient suns and scattered through space when those stars completed their cosmic dance. We've reflected on what it means for the Earth to remember and forget across geological time, and what kind of legacy we might want to leave for future forms of consciousness. We've explored the mystery of intelligence itself, imagining forms of awareness that might have developed in crystal caves deep in the Earth, or in the complex weather patterns of ancient skies. We've considered what we might want to say to hypothetical previous civilizations, and realized that we would probably want to tell them about the same fundamental experiences that make consciousness beautiful: music and friendship, wonder and love, the simple joy of being aware in a universe full of beauty. We found peace in the great cycles of renewal that govern everything from individual lives to entire civilizations, recognizing that endings are not failures but natural completions in the universe's ongoing exploration of possibility. We've learned to be comfortable with mystery, to find wonder in questions that may never have complete answers, to rest peacefully in the beautiful, not knowing that connects us to the deepest aspects of existence. Throughout this gentle journey, we've discovered that whether or not previous civilizations actually existed on Earth, the very act of wondering about them connects us to something profound and beautiful about the nature of consciousness itself. Through our capacity to ask these questions, to imagine these possibilities, to find meaning in mysteries larger than ourselves, we participate in the universe's ongoing dialogue with itself about the nature of awareness and intelligence and wonder. And now, as this peaceful exploration draws to its close, you might find yourself feeling a deep sense of connection, not just to our own planet and its long history, but to the cosmos itself, to all forms of consciousness that have ever wondered about their place in the vast scheme of things. You are part of an ancient community of wondering beings, connected across time by your shared capacity for awe and curiosity and love. The atoms in your body have been part of stars and planets, mountains and oceans, countless other living beings across the eons. The awareness that looks out through your eyes, the consciousness that wonders and dreams and finds beauty in existence. This too is part of something much larger than your individual lifetime, part of the universe's eternal experiment with knowing itself through countless different forms of awareness. As you continue to breathe slowly and peacefully, letting these gentle thoughts drift through your mind like soft clouds across an evening sky, know that you are exactly where you belong in this vast story. Your consciousness, your capacity for wonder, your ability to find meaning in mystery, These are among the most precious phenomena in the universe. Gifts beyond measure that you give simply by being awake and capable of love. Whether you fall asleep tonight thinking about ancient octopus civilizations or crystal cave intelligences, about fossil raindrops or the patient recycling of starlight into new forms of beauty, know that your wondering itself is part of what makes the universe a place where intelligence can flourish, where consciousness can find joy in its own existence, where matter can organize itself into beings capable of love and awe and peaceful contentment. Tomorrow will bring new wonders, new questions, new opportunities to participate in the ongoing miracle of awareness. But for now, rest peacefully in this moment of gentle not knowing, this beautiful mystery of being conscious in a universe so vast and strange and wonderful that we may never fully understand it, and may never need to. The Earth continues its ancient dance through space, carrying you safely through the cosmic darkness as it has carried countless other forms of life. Across the eons, the stars shine with light that began its journey millions of years ago, light that travels across impossible distances just to reach your eyes on this quiet evening. You are held by forces and processes and cycles of renewal that are older than continents, more patient than mountains, more enduring than anything we can fully comprehend. And in this vast, patient, beautiful universe, your consciousness is not an accident, but a celebration. Not a temporary arrangement of atoms, but a precious window through which existence gets to know and appreciate itself. Through your awareness, the cosmos experiences a moment of self-recognition. Through your capacity for wonder, the universe discovers its own infinite capacity for beauty and meaning. Rest now in that knowledge, in that connection, in that beautiful mystery. Let your breathing grow ever slower and deeper. Let your thoughts drift like gentle clouds across the peaceful sky of your mind. Let yourself sink into the soft embrace of sleep, knowing that you are part of something vast and wonderful and eternal. Wherever you are in this beautiful world, whatever time zone cradles your rest, whatever corner of our ancient planet holds you safely through this peaceful night, know that you are deeply connected to the long story of consciousness, to the patient unfolding of intelligence across time, to all the wondering beings who have ever looked up at the stars and felt the profound joy of being aware in an endlessly surprising universe. May your dreams be filled with gentle wonders, perhaps coral cities glowing in prehistoric seas, perhaps the slow thoughts of crystal cave intelligences, perhaps conversations across deep time with other forms of consciousness who shared your capacity for love and wonder and peaceful acceptance of the beautiful mystery of existence. May you rest peacefully in the knowledge that your awareness is a gift to the universe, that your capacity for wonder contributes to the cosmic dialogue that has been unfolding since intelligence first arose, and that will continue long after our particular form of consciousness has given way to new expressions of the universe's endless creativity. Wherever you are, I hope you're resting well tonight. May your dreams be peaceful and your mind at ease. May you wake tomorrow with renewed wonder at the mystery and beauty of being conscious in this ancient, patient, endlessly surprising universe we call home. Sleep well, dear traveler through deep time. Rest peacefully, fellow participant in the universe's eternal dialogue with itself. Good night.